Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a discipline that I think challenges, well, every single person in a leadership role today.
Mm.
Whether you're running a massive company or just a small volunteer team, you have to ask, what if the most powerful people in your organization aren't the ones giving the orders,
Right.
but the ones people choose to follow willingly?
That's the key word.
And that moment, when your sheer effort just doesn't seem to produce the impact you expect anymore, that's what we're tackling today.
Yeah.
We've got a fascinating stack of sources that define this as the influence problem. So our mission is to really unpack the difference between just having authority and having influence that actually lasts.
And that distinction is so vital because, the sources we've reviewed, they hit this core paradox immediately. True influence, it gets mistaken for weakness all the time.
Right, like it's soft.
Exactly. But it's actually strength. It's strength expressed through service. It flows directly from trust, from credibility, not from leverage or pressure. So this whole deep dive is about giving you the frameworks you need to lead without ever having to use force.
I love that framing, leading without force, because the foundational insight from our material today is this really simple trade-off. Authority can get you obedience. You can force someone's hand, but it can never, ever get you their commitment. Influence, on the other hand, is the only thing strong enough to turn that simple compliance into, well, deep ownership.
Okay, so let's dive into what our sources call the quiet crisis of compliance. On paper, everything looks fine.
Right.
The org chart is clean, meetings are happening, emails are flying. But when you rely only on that positional authority, the momentum just becomes so incredibly fragile.
It is. It's like driving a car where the engine is running, but your foot is always on the brake.
That's a great analogy. And the sources are clear. This isn't some visible catastrophic failure. It's a silent cost. It's pervasive. The leader defaults to pressure because, well, it's easy.
It's easier than persuasion.
Way easier than the hard work of persuasion.
Yeah.
And they lean on control instead of taking the time to build up credibility.
So what's the outcome?
The key insight is that people comply, but they do not commit. And the cost of that is paid in what we call discretionary effort. The energy, the creativity, the initiative that someone chooses to give.
The extra stuff?
The stuff they aren't required to give. When you have compliance, you just get the minimum viable product. You get teams that show up, sure, but they don't invest.
I think we've all felt this. You send out a major strategy email on a Monday morning. If your team is operating on pure authority, they'll acknowledge it? Maybe.
Maybe.
They might even do the tasks you assigned. But if they're operating on influence, they read that email and immediately start thinking about how to make the mission better in ways they weren't even told to. Compliance just does the task. Commitment improves it.
Exactly. And that subtle cost, over time, it becomes unmistakable. Productivity just plateaus, innovation dies on the vine, and team loyalty, it's gone.
So you have obedience.
You have obedience, but you have zero allegiance.
Yeah.
That willingness to stick around when things get tough is completely missing.
And this is why this matters so much right now. We live in a world with, highly mobile talent, flatter teams, and just massive skepticism toward institutions.
Loyalty is not a given anymore.
It's not automatic. People don't volunteer or stay in a tough job because they have to. They do it because they believe in the mission and, maybe more importantly, they trust the person leading it. That impressive title on your business card.
It expired.
It expires really, really quickly. True influence is what endures.
So to find a model for this kind of sustainable influence, our sources introduce a concept most of us have probably heard of, servant leadership.
Right.
But crucially, the material stresses this isn't some abstract soft skill we pull out when things are easy. It's framed as a decisive strategic advance.
Okay, how so?
It's what allows leaders to win trust, not just battles. And the model for it was laid out centuries ago.
That's so interesting. You have modern researchers confirming that, vulnerability and proximity build better teams, but the sources point way back to an ancient, really radical example.
Jesus washing his disciples' feet in John chapter 13.
Right.
And what's fascinating here is the context the source material gives. This act wasn't done by someone looking for validation or approval.
No.
John frames the moment by noting that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. He was completely secure in his ultimate authority.
And because of that security?
He could perform the lowest task of a household servant. He just completely inverted the entire hierarchy of power.
This is where I want to pause because this goes against so much conventional thinking. If a leader is that powerful, why risk lowering themselves? I mean, we often believe leadership requires control,
It's
distance,
professional distance, yeah.
because we're afraid that proximity might erode respect or breed contempt. So what do the sources say to that leader who's just afraid service looks like weakness?
The sources argue that fear is rooted in insecurity. If you need your title to get respect, then you have to maintain distance. But if your authority is rooted in your character and the mission,
You can afford to get close.
you can afford proximity. And that proximity gives you empathy. It gives the leader the data they need to understand what motivates their team, or maybe more importantly, what burdens them. But you can't genuinely serve people you don't actually know.
So it's not a weakness, it's a data gathering tool.
In a way, yes. The theological term for that self-emptying act, by the way, is kenosis. But the core principle is simple. Leadership is defined by what you're willing to give up, not what you demand to hold on to.
And we see this same paradox in another major figure cited in the material, Moses. He led this massive, difficult, often resistant nation, and not through dominance, not through intimidation. His leadership lasted because of his humility, his dependence on something greater than himself.
His authority flowed from his dependence.
Yes, not his dominance. It confirms that meekness, which is really just strength under control for a higher purpose, is the prerequisite for real influence.
At the end of the day, the core truth for you, the listener, is this. Authority can compel surface-level behavior, but the servant model of influence,
Yeah.
it transforms hearts. It moves people from I have to I want to.
Okay, so let's pivot to the currency of influence. It often gets confused with things that just create a platform, right? Like charisma or a big social media following or a great network.
Yeah, visible stuff.
Right. But our sources are crystal clear. Those things might get you in the door, but they cannot sustain trust. So how do we spot the crucial difference between genuine influence and its darker shadow manipulation?
The material gives us a really clear framework, and it's centered entirely on one thing, intent.
Okay.
Influence is relational, it's moral, it's rooted in character. The methods are persuasion, credibility, sharing a collective vision, and the outcome is voluntary, enthusiastic commitment.
And manipulation.
Manipulation is purely transactional. It leverages fear, guilt, dependency. It serves the self-interest of the leader or just their need for control. The outcome is compliance, sure, but the cost is this inevitable erosion of relationship and culture.
That distinction carries a really heavy moral weight. Manipulation treats people as means to an end.
Tools.
Exactly, tools to achieve your goal. But servant leadership, because it sees people with inherent dignity, it treats them as ends in themselves. It means you have to care about their success just as much as your own.
And to resist that lure of manipulation, you have to build a practical foundation. The sources actually link the critical leadership skill of emotional intelligence, EI, directly to spiritual maturity.
So EI being self-awareness, empathy, emotional regulation.
All of that.
Why is that link so crucial? Why isn't just being technically brilliant enough?
Because manipulation is just expertise used for selfish ends. EI gives you the self-awareness to recognize when you're tempted to leverage someone's dependency or fear. But it's the moral framework, the patience, the gentleness, the self-control cited in the sources that provides the internal governor.
The thing that stops you.
The thing that stops you. It ensures you use your capacity for the benefit of others, not just for your own gain.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're highly intelligent but you lack empathy, you're just a very efficient manipulator.
And that has organizational consequences.
Huge ones. If we connect this to the bigger picture, control-based leadership is incredibly fragile for an organization. It might hit the short-term metrics, yeah. But the moment the controlling leader exits, gets promoted, retires, whatever, the compliance just collapses.
Because the loyalty was to them.
Allegiance was never transferred to the mission. It was only enforced by that one person.
That brings us to the most practical part of our deep dive. How do we actually transition this servant model into daily practice? The goal is moving from that fragile compliance to genuine ownership. So how do we cultivate this multiplying influence in a modern setting?
We have to fundamentally reframe how we measure success. Our sources really focus on the multiplication principle. It echoes instruction like Timothy 2.2, and trust to faithful people who will be able to teach others also.
So your success isn't what you do.
Exactly. True influence is measured not by what you can accomplish alone, but by the growth, the capacity, the autonomy of the people you lead. You have to become a multiplication machine, not a centralized processing unit.
So we're talking about moving from delegation as just task assignment to delegation as development.
Precisely. Delegation has to be seen as a discipleship tool. A controlling leader, they delegate a task and then they micromanage every single step.
Right.
A servant leader delegates a problem and the authority to solve it. They provide the resources for people to make meaningful decisions. And that's what fosters initiative. That's what fosters real growth. It shifts the burden of ownership onto the person being led.
And that's the only way they grow.
It's the only way they truly grow their own capacity.
I think this really defines a leader's ultimate legacy perfectly. Control-based leadership. It leaves behind impressive structures, the leader's monument, but it leaves behind fragile people who can't function without constant direction. Servant leadership, on the other hand, builds people who outlast the leader. It creates cultures where responsibility is shared willingly, where the vision is truly owned, not just, rented until the next paycheck.
And for this multiplication to be sustainable, it requires balance. True influence is intentional. It's disciplined. Leading through service does not mean allowing chaos.
Right. It's not a free-for-all.
Not at all. It means leading with compassion while maintaining absolute clarity and enforcing responsibility. You extend trust generously, but you maintain sharp accountability to the mission. That anchor of character is what ensures your compassion doesn't become permissiveness.
So that transition from being a commander to being a cultivator, it's hard work. It takes real intentionality every single day. #tag outro. So to recap the core takeaway from our sources today, sustainable influence is not built through these dramatic, impressive assertions of power.
No.
It's cultivated patiently through consistency, through impeccable character, and through small, faithful acts of service, being willing to, wash the feet of those you lead. True power in this framework is just disciplined strength submitted to humility.
The ultimate distinction for you to carry forward into your own role, whatever that is this. The measure of your influence isn't how quickly people comply with your direct orders. It's how deeply they align with the vision when you're not even in the room.
That's the real test.
That is the test. So a final thought for you to consider in your own environment. What profound shifts in culture and trust begin to happen when you allow genuine trust, rather than just positional authority, to become your primary source of leadership power?
The question isn't whether you can fire someone who disobeys. It's whether you can influence someone who has the freedom to just walk away. Where in your life today are you still relying on a title that is, about to expire?